Hi, Founder fans, Jason here, and today we're discussing the Battle of Chelsea Creek, and we are fortunate to be joined by Spencer Van Herik, a Dr. Joseph Warren portrayer himself. Spencer, thank you so much for coming.
No problem. And sometimes I feel like I'm Joseph nowadays. So
I almost just called you Joseph on accident. so, the
it
battle,
feels good to be here soon.
yeah, so the Battle of Chelsea Creek. Let's get into it. Most
Yeah.
Americans know about the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and they know about the Battle of Bunker Hill not far away a few months later. But often overlooked is really the first battle after the war starts in Massachusetts, the Battle of Chelsea Creek. So, why don't you help us set the stage a little bit? What point is this in the war, and how does the battle break out?
So a lot is happening in May of 1775. Obviously, we're reeling from Lexington and Concord on April 19th. By the time the Battle of Chelsea Creek rolls around, it's May 27th. The capture of Ticonderoga in New York has happened, led by Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold, the eventual traitor, but started out well. And to help us show you kind of the things that are going on during this time, this is now becoming a provision war. I think we mentioned this the last time I talked with you, Jason, where there's a real kind of ongoing battle for livestock, grain, ammunition, all sorts of supplies. The British have control of Boston Harbor. They have now sent warships. And also, I believe right at this point now, William Howe has also just arrived just a couple of days before this battle even happens. So here to kind of show I guess we would call the prowess of the British Army versus what the colonists are trying to fight here with what they have. We actually have an artifact here from Fort Ticonderoga. And let me try to I know I'm smart here. I know I can get in frame.
Do to your left a little bit, your left.
I was like, why is the light catching it so bad? But these are musket balls that were excavated from Fort Ticonderoga. And here we have the difference between a British musket ball and an American one. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Light, for finally cooperating with me. So over, where am I pointing? Right here. I'm looking at the screen, is the British one. Notice it's slightly smaller than the one next to it. If I pulled it out of this little box, you would see fine markings from possibly, being finely machined, made. Whereas over here, we have the American one. And this is a very large bullet ball to be firing out of even a long range rifle at this point. So, they're hand making ammunition. The colonists don't have any saltpeter manufacturing sites, which helps make gunpowder. It's an issue that even Joseph Warren brings up in fall of 1774, that they need these manufacturing sites. But it never happens, even up to this point, and they are reliant on the supplies they have, and also whatever comes in from the other colonies as donations. Luckily, we have now forces, however, that aren't just Massachusetts forces. Now we have Colonel John Stark from New Hampshire. We also have Israel Putnam, who's from Connecticut. Now we're starting to have these veterans from the 7 Years' War siding with the American side, and being integral in the leadership of the Americans. So the Battle of Chelsea Creek kind of happens on a fluke. It's not supposed to happen, but it was resolved, I think, just a couple of weeks. I think it's May 14th that Joseph Warren and the rest of the Committee of Safety resolved that all of the livestock and basically any living thing is to be taken from Nattles Island and Hogs Island, which are two outlier islands within the Charles River, just within Boston Harbor.
Well, we should
So
note, not to interrupt, but we should note that
yeah,
Boston today looks extraordinarily different than it did back then. The two
yeah,
islands we're discussing today are no longer islands. They've been connected to Boston itself at this point by landfill, I guess would be the terminology.
Yeah, landfill has kind of taken over as our populations have grown, and obviously, living, and housing has kind of been developed onto these sites. But you can actually go to Grape Island, and there's a skirmish that happens just 6 days before this battle at Grape Island. And it's still there. You can actually camp there. I'm going to try and look in and see if I can do that.
Let me know. That'd be fun.
It's basically. Yeah, we'll have make a party of it.
Yeah.
But it's basically the same concept. At this, skirmish 6 days before, it's inconsequential in terms of wounded or casualties. The two sides are firing at each other, but Warren, again, rides out with Artemis Ward and meets the local militias there. It's actually the skirmish at Grape Island is the closest that Abigail Adams ever gets to the Revolutionary War. It basically happens near the Braintree residence, basically. It's geography and all of that. I've talked a lot about that, especially recently, as we try to go into these battles and try to really paint the picture of, we're not looking at the same landscape that these guys were dealing with. We still have dirt roads. There's still a lot of horseback going on. But so the Grape Island skirmish, nothing really happens from it, but the Americans basically gain control of that as well. The British actually made a deal with the landowner of Grape Island before that. And after that happens, I forget his name right now, but he basically takes the American side because he was like, well, I allowed you to take livestock from my island, but you can't even keep control of it. He's like, so why should I keep working with you? So here we have the Battle of Chelsea Creek. So on the 14th, Joseph Warren and Committee Safety basically assign Colonel John Stark and his regiment to go out to Nettles and Hogs Island to get the livestock. And there are noted also members of the Stockbridge Mohicans there as well. I think we've mentioned them. They've basically been dispersed because they're such great scouts, and they are also marksmen as well. Stark's men are noted as being able to hit squirrels off tree branches from 100 yards away. So these are the guys you want to go out to an island and gather livestock and kill basically every living thing, because you're feeding an army of thousands of men now.
And if the Patriots don't do it, the British are going to.
Right, exactly. So, around 12:30, on the 27th, Stark and his men go out to Hogs and Nettles Islands. They're basically shooting at everything that moves. They are driving cattle onto the mainland. And then Stark decides to take about 30 men over to Nettles Island. They're in Hogs Island for the most part, but then Stark takes about 30 men. They go out to Nettles Island, do the same thing, but then they decide to start burning hay in some barns. So basically, taking livestock and scorched earth policy as the day goes on. And the British notice. Vice Admiral Samuel Graves, who is actually a very interesting character throughout the Revolutionary War. I think I just moved myself out of frame briefly.
Move to your right. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
I got excited. So Samuel Graves is the Vice Admiral of the British Navy. He has a hard task. In fact, his task is, I think it's noted as, by the other British officers, is like the most lowly duty you can possibly get, because he's basically has to patrol the basically 1,000 miles of coastline between what is now Nova Scotia and Florida. And he's stationed in Boston. They see what's going on, and he basically sends out his nephew to go out in the HMS Diana. So this is also a little bit of a family affair going on. So as I pull up my notes here, so I don't get names and etc. wrong. So his nephew, Samuel Graves' nephew, is a young man who's also trying to prove himself. He's going out there to help confront these colonists who have tried to take livestock, and it's just a constant back and forth all day. They start and actually firing each other in almost a pitched battle style for a while, but then they realize that both sides are going to run out of ammunition. Marines are sent by the British too to confront Stark's men. Stark and his men kind of keep pulling back throughout the rest of the day. And the Diana, however, is running into an issue. With the low tides that used to exist within Boston Harbor. I think maybe we touched on this last time too, Jason, with the geography and the neck of Boston into Roxbury, etc. Well, if the tide's low enough back in the 18th century in Boston, it could become just sand very fast. And if you had a ship that was trying to really kind of maneuver its way through the Charles River, it could get beached if you have a captain who doesn't really know what they're doing. So you have these British forces that aren't familiar with these tides and the winds. Here's a young man on the HMS Diana who's the nephew of the Vice Admiral trying to prove himself. But he's running into wind issues, and he knows he's about to get beached, basically, if he's not careful. So Vice Admiral Graves sees his nephew struggling and sends out barges of men and Marines to go help tow him out of the water. And he also sends over another sloop, the sloop Britannia, which is basically a sloop of a different ship, also patrolled by, I believe, his other nephew. So this is a little bit of a family affair going on here in terms of like trying to prove yourself within the Navy as well. And they keep trying to tow the Diana out. They can't do it. They think they got the tide on their side, but then here comes Joseph Warren, Israel Putnam, and 300 more men. They lined up on the beach, and not only that, they bring 2 horse-drawn cannon. Stark also had brought small artillery with him earlier in the day. So now we're starting to see those cannon that the British were trying to seize at Lexington and Concord. We're starting to see that actually finally play out. So the Americans and British, they start shooting at each other. And realizing, young Lieutenant Graves on the HMS Diana kind of realizes that he's in a tough spot. And Israel Putnam realizes it too. And this is about, I think now we're about like at 8 p.m. Right? This has been going on all day. Stark's men have been out there since just after midnight. They're exhausted. And now we have Israel Putnam's men with Warren and a lot of others, 300 men total estimated, firing upon this ship. Israel Putnam realizes that, one, it's not worth either side to expend ammunition anymore, especially for the Americans. As you can see, their ammunition's not so great to begin with. And it's a big advantage for the Americans if they capture the ship, because they will take young Lieutenant Graves hostage. Right. And that we're dealing with also now, prisoners of war. So he knows that, and Israel Putnam walks out onto, he's known as walking out, offering quarter to the young lieutenant, and basically the lieutenant replies by shooting 2 cannon at him and the rest of the forces. So battle continues again. They start shooting at each other. The Diana actually looks like it's about to escape, and then the wind apparently changes again and beaches itself about 180 feet from the shoreline. So, then here's like the barges and the sloops trying to save young Lieutenant Graves and his men. As soon as that happens, the Americans now have a ship potentially that's currently beached, but they also now have more cannon. So this is still a huge win for them. And the fact that, this is kind of also a part 2 of the Gaspee affair that happened in Rhode Island in late 1772, same concept where the Americans don't have warships. They have no navy to speak of even until late in 1775, once the Continental Congress finally decides to implement a navy. And John Hancock is very implemental, he's integral, I should say, in terms of funding those ships. But so here's these guys, no ship, some cannon. grossly being underestimated yet again. It's just the constant threat of the British Army not expecting these guys to overcome, and they captured the ship.
Yeah, and then so the Graves, I guess cousins. They're both Vice Admiral Graves' nephews, but I don't know them as brothers, so I would assume they're cousins.
I think they're cousins. I was trying to go back in my notes here,
No, that's
and
all right. Yeah.
I'm not trying to look down too much.
Yeah, no, we'll just say they're both nephews, but they both
right.
do escape from the ship, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
the Americans
they were able
essentially
to
take an abandoned vessel.
Yeah, so they abandoned ship finally, and it's even for a while, the ship is turned on its side, and they're using the hull, the bulk of the ship as a shield, and the colonists are at this point infuriated because they offered quarter. And they responded by firing cannon directly at them. In fact, it's noted that a cannonball, one of them, whizzes right by Israel Putnam. So it's like, okay, fine. So the Americans keep firing at them. It's in the long run, it kind of hurts them, because here's the Diana. They figure out that they've blown this thing to bits anyway. And of course, seeing all this while it's happening is General Thomas Gage from Boston as well. So he sees that this has happened, and he actually sends more Marines to try and deal with these men. And they actually continue. When they get there, they start firing upon the Americans, but they're so out of reach by this point. The Americans they've already done their damage. So it's kind of a Herik, order to kind of send out more men to kind of as a show of force. But the Americans stripped the cannon. Even like in the tail end of them trying to flee, Joseph Warren is even seen running down the beach and shooting at them still. So it's one of these, another moment for Warren that, and it's a huge notch in his belt, and for Israel Putnam. Even though Artemus Ward is named the commander-in-chief of the Massachusetts forces by Warren. Warren's the president, and here he is yet again, 6 days after the last skirmish. Now he's fighting in battle willingly. So it's just this battle is so just. I love that you've given me a chance to talk about it, because
I love that you came to talk about it.
The success of it and the consequences of it, like I said, these guys are dealing with low ammunition the days that have. Here, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I understand it was a huge morale boost to the Continentals. It had been about a month, more than a month, since they had taken succeeded at Lexington and Concord. I'm not sure if word has arrived yet of Ticonderoga, but it's just all this good news. The Americans get the feeling of, hey, we might actually be able to do this.
Yeah, and Fort Ticonderoga has happened at this point.
Yeah, so, I'm not sure if they know about it in Boston yet.
Oh, they do.
Do they?
Yeah,
oh, okay. Cool. Well, there you go.
They're already sending. Warren actually sends orders to Fort Ticonderoga on the 17th, I think, to get the cannon back from Fort Ticonderoga. And of course, as we know, that doesn't happen until much later with Henry Knox and the artillery train later in 1775. But again, there's a lot happening in May of 1775. So yes, we have Fort Ticonderoga. It's troops led by Ethan Allen, who's from a different colony. Colonel, this young Colonel Benedict Arnold, who's rising his own men from Connecticut.
American
now here's
hero,
Israel Putnam. Yeah, and Israel Putnam is already a hero of this 7 Years' War. For this veteran to side with the Americans and to be next to Warren a lot, there is a lot of deliberations noted between them as kind of military leaders. So,
and I always like to give a shout out to Seth Warren when we talk about Ticonderoga. Seth Warren left Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold at Ticonderoga and went up to Crown Point, New York, and took that fort all by himself.
Yes.
Although that was seems a lot easier than even Ticonderoga, which itself was fairly easy to do. But
yeah,
I do like to give him that thumbs up.
All things considered, but yeah, and I think the capture of Crown Point is also already known by the Boston leadership at this point as well. So, again, there's a rallying point, and of all these different types of troops from all the colonies, that unite or die, mentality that they've really taken on here is starting to happen. And the forces that are in Cambridge are from New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and of course, majority Massachusetts at this point. But with Warren being this active president, next to a proven veteran, with a guy like Artemus Ward and then Colonel William Prescott, of course, and so many others. This is a morale boost. And so what they do as a further morale boost, knowing that this wreckage is within sight of Boston, at the end of all said and done, when they strip this ship of everything of value, they decide to burn it. So again, chapter 2 of the Gaspee Affair, setting a British ship on fire. And it's within view of Boston Harbor. It's a clear sign of rebellion. And again, the implication of this, of course, that is leading into what we know, of course, the big battle of Bunker Hill. This event, the cannon that's for the Americans there comes from this ship that, from this battle that happened.
Yeah. So I have another kind of on topic but off topic question. So the Battle of Chelsea Creek that we've been talking about has several names. I have to read them over here. It's sometimes called the Battle of Noddle's Island, the Battle of Hog Island, which we've discussed, and the Battle of Chelsea Estuary, which I think is very fancy. My question I like that one a lot too. It's sexier.
It is. I like that one. Yeah. But yeah, Hogs Island and Noddle's Island are both involved in this.
They're both part of the battle, yeah. So my question is, if it was overseen by Admiral Simcoe, and he's not Simcoe, Admiral Graves, and Admiral Graves is watching his nephew Graves lose one ship and his other nephew not rescuing the other one, literally watching it, why can't it be called the Graves family disaster or something of that nature?
I like that too. Right? It's so, and there's a lot of that. Obviously, William Howe and then his brother also are generals for like the regular army. After Gage is, relinquished of his duty as main general. Yeah. So there's, again, that these connections of people and family and friends, like these people are so interconnected, especially at this point.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Spencer, thank you so much for coming by. Thank you so much for your time. Let's have you back here real soon, and we'll talk about more American Revolution.
Maybe the Battle of Bunker Hill next. The one everyone wants to talk
about. I think you mean the Battle of Breed's Hill, but we're not going to go there. Oh, is that mean? Is that unspeakable?
Yeah. I think we joked about that last time. There's always one that says, "Excuse me, but." Yes.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks a lot, Jason.
Absolutely. Founder fans, again, that was Spencer Van Herik. He is a Dr. Joseph Warren portrayer. Check the link in the description below for all of his information. Make sure you hit like and subscribe if you're new here for more American Revolution 5 days a week.